You remember the moment, the one where everything inside you felt like it was collapsing at once. Your chest was tight. Your thoughts were louder than your faith. You were tired of pretending you were fine, tired of being strong, tired of carrying weight no one else could see. And for a second, just 1 second, you thought, I cannot do this anymore. You did not say it out loud. You did not make a scene. You did not break in front of anyone. But inside, something was cracking. You questioned your strength. You questioned your purpose. You even questioned me. Not because you stopped believing, but because the silence felt unbearable. You prayed, yet nothing seemed to move. You hoped, yet nothing changed. And the exhaustion became more emotional than physical. I was there in that moment, not watching from a distance, not measuring your weakness. I was there when you almost let go, when your faith felt fragile, when your mind whispered lies that sounded convincing. You thought you were one step away from breaking, but you were one breath away from being held. You did not survive because you are unbreakable. You survived because you were carried. There was a strength beneath your strength, a presence beneath your fear, a protection you could not see, but you were standing inside of it. What you felt as collapse was actually resistance. What you felt as weakness was the stretching of something deeper inside you. And what you thought would destroy you became the moment that revealed who you really are. Now, listen carefully. The fact that you are still here means something. The fact that you did not give up means something. There is a reason you did not fall apart. And if you stay with me through this message, you will begin to understand why. There was a precise second when the weight felt unbearable, not dramatic, not loud, just heavy. The kind of heaviness that settles in your chest and refuses to move. You were not looking for attention. You were not trying to escape responsibility. You were simply tired of fighting something that would not stop pressing against you. You kept showing up while feeling empty. You kept answering messages while your heart felt distant. You kept working while your thoughts were scattered. And the most painful part was this: no one noticed how close you were to breaking. You were functioning, but you were not okay. The pressure was not just external, it was internal. The expectations you placed on yourself, the fear of disappointing others, the quiet comparison that made you feel behind, the spiritual doubt that whispered, "Why is this so hard? If I am trying to do what is right?" You started questioning your own capacity. Maybe I am not strong enough. Maybe I am not faithful enough. Maybe I am not built for this. Those thoughts did not shout. They spoke calmly, and that is what made them dangerous. But here is what you could not see in that moment. The breaking point you feared was not a sign of failure. It was a signal that you had been carrying too much alone, a signal that your strength was being stretched beyond your understanding, a signal that something deeper was forming underneath the surface. You thought the pressure meant you were losing, but pressure also reveals structure. And when everything pressed against you, you did not collapse. You bent. You felt it. You almost broke, but you did not. And that difference matters more than you realize. What made it harder was not the pressure itself. It was the silence around it. You were unraveling internally while the world continued normally. People talked about ordinary things. They laughed. They made plans. And you stood there carrying a storm no one could see. You became skilled at functioning while fractured. You answered questions while your mind was racing. You smiled while replaying fears that would not leave you. You told people you were fine because explaining the depth of your exhaustion felt impossible. How do you describe a weight that has no visible shape? The hardest battles are the ones that happen in the mind, not because they are louder, but because they are private. You fought thoughts that questioned your worth. You wrestled with disappointment that never fully healed. You revisited conversations that hurt more than you admitted, and every time you tried to push it down, it returned stronger. You began to fear your own thoughts, not in panic, but in quiet concern. Why does this keep coming back? Why does this still hurt? Why am I so tired when nothing dramatic is happening? That is what made it dangerous. There was no explosion, no obvious collapse, just a slow erosion of confidence, a slow draining of emotional strength, a gradual weakening that made you doubt your own stability. And yet, in the middle of that hidden breakdown, something else was happening. You were still choosing restraint instead of reaction. You were still choosing silence instead of chaos. You were still choosing not to give up, even when no one would have blamed you if you did. You thought you were barely holding on, but holding on is still strength. And what you did not see was that the very place you felt most fragile was the place where something deeper was being anchored. There was a moment that almost changed everything. Not a dramatic collapse, not a public breakdown, just a quiet internal decision forming. The thought that whispered, I cannot keep doing this. The temptation to detach, to stop caring, to lower your expectations so you would not be disappointed again. It was subtle. You did not announce it. You did not even fully admit it to yourself. But you felt it, that thin line between enduring and surrendering, that fragile space where giving up seems reasonable, logical, even peaceful. You were not trying to be rebellious. You were trying to survive. When the effort feels endless and the results feel invisible, the heart begins to negotiate with itself. Maybe it is easier to stop hoping. Maybe it is safer not to expect anything. Maybe it is smarter to protect yourself by withdrawing. That is the second most people misunderstand. They think breaking looks loud, but sometimes breaking looks like emotional numbness, like pulling back, like shrinking your dreams so they cannot hurt you anymore. And right there, in that fragile second, something interrupted the fall. Not a thunderbolt, not a dramatic sign, just a quiet resistance inside you, a hesitation, a pause, a breath that felt heavier than usual. You could have let go, but you did not. You could have hardened your heart, but you did not. You could have walked away emotionally, but you stayed. You thought that hesitation was weakness. It was not. It was the invisible strength rising before the collapse. It was protection, activating before destruction could settle in. You almost let go, but you did not. And that difference is not small. It is everything. You keep thinking you survived because you are strong. But that is not the full truth. You were tired. You were confused. You were stretched beyond what felt reasonable. And yet, something steadied you from underneath. It was not adrenaline. It was not pride. It was not stubbornness. It was something quieter, something deeper, a strength that did not shout but anchored, a presence that did not overwhelm but supported. You felt it in small ways, a sudden calm in the middle of spiraling thoughts, a memory of truth when lies sounded convincing, a restraint when you could have reacted, a moment of clarity when everything seemed chaotic. These were not coincidences. They were interventions. You were being held in ways you could not measure. You thought your faith was barely surviving. But faith does not always feel loud. Sometimes faith is simply the decision to breathe one more time, to try one more day, to whisper one more prayer, even when you feel unheard. There was a layer beneath your emotions, beneath your fear, beneath your exhaustion. And that layer did not crack. It carried you when you did not even realize you were being carried. You were not standing alone on your own strength. You were standing inside unseen protection, inside mercy you did not request, inside grace you did not calculate. You almost broke because the pressure was real, but you did not break because something stronger than the pressure was holding you in place. And if that strength sustained you then, what does that say about what you are capable of now? You keep focusing on how close you were to falling apart. But look at what that moment exposed. It showed you that your foundation is deeper than your fear. It showed you that your heart, even when tired, still chooses endurance. It showed you that your spirit bends, but it does not snap. Pressure does not only threaten structure, it reveals structure. When everything pressed against you, your values did not disappear. Your compassion did not vanish. Your desire to do what is right did not collapse. Even in exhaustion, You did not become someone else. You remained you. That matters. You learned something about yourself that comfort could never teach you. You learned that you can carry weight longer than you thought. You learned that your mind can be challenged without being destroyed. You learned that your faith can be questioned without being erased. You discovered limits, yes, but you also discovered capacity. The version of you before that season believed strength meant never feeling weak. Now, you know, strength sometimes looks like trembling and continuing anyway. It looks like questioning and still choosing trust. It looks like crying without surrendering. You almost broke, but what surfaced instead was resilience you did not know you had. And resilience is not loud. It does not demand applause. It quietly rebuilds confidence from the inside out. You thought that season would define you by your weakness. Instead, it revealed your depth. And there is more depth in you than you have allowed yourself to see. You keep asking why it had to be that hard, why the pressure had to reach that level, why the exhaustion felt so intense. But what if the real question is not why it was heavy, but what it was preventing? You almost broke, yes, but breaking at that moment might have pushed you into decisions that would have reshaped your future in ways you were not ready to carry. When pain rises high enough, people say things they cannot take back. They walk away from things that still had purpose. They shut down parts of their heart that were meant to stay alive. You were close to that edge, and yet something restrained you. You did not send the message you were about to send. You did not abandon the responsibility you were tempted to escape. You did not harden your heart in the way you briefly considered. That restraint was not weakness. It was protection. Sometimes protection does not look like removal of pressure. It looks like preservation of clarity. You were being guarded from acting out of exhaustion, guarded from choices made in emotional overflow, guarded from permanent reactions to temporary pain. You thought the strength was simply helping you endure, but it was also shielding you from consequences you could not yet see. There are paths you did not take, words you did not release, bridges you did not burn. And one day, you will understand how critical that restraint was. You almost broke, but you were also being kept from breaking something else. And that is not random. After everything settled, after the tension eased just enough for you to breathe again, you began to see something clearly. You were still here, still thinking, still believing, still capable of feeling hope, even if it was small. That matters more than you realize. You thought that season would redefine you as fragile, but it revealed something stronger. It showed you that your identity is not built on circumstances. It is not dependent on constant success or emotional stability. It is rooted deeper than outcomes. You did not become colder. You did not become bitter. You did not lose your compassion. You did not lose your desire for truth. That means the pressure did not own you. It tested you, but it did not claim you. Your identity survived the storm. You are not defined by how close you came to breaking. You are defined by the fact that you did not let the breaking rewrite who you are. You did not surrender your values. You did not surrender your conscience. You did not surrender your inner pursuit of something higher. There is strength in that. You are more grounded now, more aware, less naive perhaps, but more stable. The version of you that almost broke is not weaker. It is wiser. It is sharper. It is less dependent on approval and more anchored internally. That is growth you cannot fake. You survived the season, but more importantly, your identity survived it. And the person standing now is not the same as the one who entered that storm. You almost broke. That is true. The pressure was real. The exhaustion was real. The doubts were real. But here you are, breathing, thinking, listening, still standing. That alone tells a story. You were closer to your limit than anyone knew. You questioned yourself in ways you never had before. You wrestled with thoughts that felt convincing. You stood on an edge that could have changed everything, and yet you did not fall. Not because you are perfect, not because you are fearless, but because something steadied you when your strength felt insufficient. You survived a version of yourself that thought it could not go any further. You endured a season that tested your internal structure, and what remains is not a broken person. It is a refined one. Look at what did not collapse. Your values remain. Your conscience remains. Your capacity to hope remains. Your ability to care remains. The storm shook you, but it did not own you. There is power in that realization. You are not the person who almost broke. You are the person who almost broke and did not. That difference changes how you see yourself. It changes how you approach the next challenge. It changes how you measure your own strength. The next time pressure rises, you will remember this. You have been here before. You have felt the weight. You have stood at the edge, and you have discovered that there is something beneath you that does not give way. You are still here. That is not accidental. You are still standing, and that means more than you think.